I'm a bad motherfucker.
All right, we are joined by a very special guest at a very important moment. Stella Assange is an international lawyer and human rights activist. She has a degree in law and politics from SOAS University in London, a master's of science in refugee law from Oxford, and a master's in public international law from the Complutense University of Madrid. Since 2011, she has been a member of Julian Assange's legal defense team, and in March 2022, the two were married in a ceremony at Belmarsh Prison. Stella, thank you very much for joining us. I know you're busy, and it's very late right now where you are.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So we are going to go to Keaton for our first question.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as Russell just mentioned in the introduction, you married Julian at Belmarsh Prison in March of 2022. What was that day like, and what state is he in now, physically, psychologically? How hopeful is he, if at all, for his eventual release and freedom?
Well, Julian has been in this high security prison in the UK for almost 5 years. It will be 5 years in April. And when he went in 2019, April 2019, we had already talked about, obviously, we were engaged, but there hadn't been the moment to get married. We had tried inside the embassy in Ecuador, but for legal reasons at the time, that wasn't possible. And so eventually we decided, well, let's just get married in the prison, because we don't know when the ideal moment will be. And predictably, it became quite a battle with the prison, because this is kind of the dynamic that we have always had to deal with Belmarsh. So it took us about a year and a half to actually manage to get married. We got married in March 2022. It was a very special day in the sense that we felt like we had won a battle. After a lot of back and forth with the prison, we had threatened to sue them. They obstructed right till the end. We had wanted two of Julian's and my friends to be the witnesses. Those witnesses were turned down on the basis they were journalists, which is the natural thing. Julian being a journalist and being the editor of a publication, and his friends are also journalists. And that was not permitted on the basis that they were journalists. Also, the photographer that was going to take pictures inside applied for authorization, was turned down also on the basis that he also freelances as a journalist for a major wire service. So in spite of all this, we finally managed to get married. There were 6 people in the room, plus 2 guards. That was my mom and my brother, and Julian's father and his brother, and the children. And we weren't allowed to have any more guests to our wedding. And it was it was a wonderful day. We felt like we owned the moment. And how is he doing? Well, I mean, this question, it comes up constantly, and I'm very grateful that people ask it, but it's a very difficult one to answer, because it really varies from day to day, from week to week. The Christmas period was very tough. It's tough every Christmas. This was his 5th Christmas inside Belmarsh Prison. And tough because there are less visits. There's less staff, which means increased isolation. And he got ill. He was quite ill with fever and so on. He's recovered from that. He's still coughing a bit, but there was a period where he wasn't able to see a doctor. We had to call the Australian embassy to intervene to get him to be able to be seen by a doctor. It took a few days. So these things, it's kind of tedious, but it's a bit of the day-to-day battle that he has to deal with. And on top of all of this, then on the 29th of December, I think it was, John Pilger, who was a dear friend of ours,
Yes.
passed away. And this was a really a big blow at a low moment. Julian knew that John was very poorly and was able to get a message to him. And John was able to respond to that message about a week before he passed away. So I'm thankful that they had some chance to say goodbye. But it's really heartbreaking because they were very close. And when you're in prison in a kind of indefinite situation like this, an indefinite imprisonment, you think about what you will do when you get out, and inevitably it's going back to, well, I would love to sit around the table with my old friends and do the things I enjoyed doing. And obviously over time, 5 years since he was abducted basically from the embassy, the 7 years before that he was inside the embassy, all these possibilities start falling away over time, and it's really heartbreaking.
You've said that the US-UK extradition treaty does not allow for imprisonment for political offenses, of which what he's being charged with is clearly a political offense. He was originally imprisoned on the premise of bail jumping. He's long since served the 50-month sentence for that. Is his detention at this point illegal? Is he simply a political prisoner now?
He is simply a political prisoner, and he always was. I mean, look, he was the moment he was arrested from the embassy, and this detail of the chronology is often lost. The moment he was arrested, it was announced that he was arrested in relation to a minor bail violation for which there's very rarely any prison time, let alone a fine. I mean, especially when the failure to surrender concerned someone who was seeking political asylum and obtained it for 7 years in relation to U.S. extradition. So from the moment he was arrested, it was announced that there was a extradition request from the United States, and that in fact a warrant had been sealed in the UK courts since December 2017. So the UK system had been complicit. It had been in cahoots with the US to get Julian long before his arrest, even before there was any formal charge by the Trump administration. The formal charge came in March 2018. So over a year before his arrest, the UK already knew that they were holding him, in fact, for the US extradition. And the Bail Act violation, alleged Bail Act violation, was a complete anomaly. And he served it. He had finished serving it by September 2019, because you only serve 50% of a custodial sentence of that type here in the UK. So since September 2019, the sole justification or claimed justification for his imprisonment is that there is an outstanding extradition request for the US. And I think this is kind of a game that is played between the US and the UK. The US says, oh, well, we've just put in an extradition request. The UK is holding him, and we don't actually have to. We can pretend like this is not really our problem unless he's on our soil. And then the UK goes, well, we're just holding him on behalf of the United States. We're not even charging him here. They want to extradite him. They don't want him to have bail. And therefore, we're just, complying with the wishes of the United States. So he kind of falls between the cracks, and the US and the UK throw the ball to each other. And there's a degree of complexity in the process, but the process is really irrelevant. The point is that Julian is a political prisoner. He is charged with political crimes under the Espionage Act. The nature of the alleged crime is publishing true information that indicts the United States, the same country that's trying to extradite him and put him in prison. You couldn't have a clearer case of political persecution of a journalist. And if this were any other country, any of the bogeymen that usually pop up in speeches, then it would be obvious, and he would be used as a case, a cause célèbre for the West. But it happens to be the case that it is the West that has made him the most consequential, the most important political prisoner of our times. And of course, the rest of the world is very happy to call the US and the UK and the West out for this travesty again and again and again.
Yeah, well, it's do as we say, not as we do. We recently spoke to Glenn Greenwald, and we were talking about the Stephen Donziger case, where this lawyer just had his entire life destroyed for winning a settlement for Native peoples that had been abused by Chevron. And I asked him, are you afraid they're going to do that to you eventually? And he said, any dissident that is really effective, they will destroy you. They will come for you. So in relation to what you just described, where really he's being held as a political prisoner illegally in Belmarsh, are you concerned that the final hearing coming up in February is not going to be a fair hearing, but a political one?
There's no question that there is no possibility of a fair hearing, not in the UK, not in the US. They've taken over a decade of Julian's life because he did nothing wrong, nothing different to any other publisher, any other journalist. The only difference is that they decided to make an example of him and through him to set a precedent that could be used against the rest of the press.
Right.
In the United States, the nature of the prosecution is that he cannot mount a public interest defense. The proposition here is that he should be extradited to a trial where he cannot mount a defense. The potential sentence is 175 years. It is literally for receiving, possessing, and communicating true information of the highest public interest to the public. There's no, the whole espionage. The term espionage is a real misnomer because there's no allegation that he was acting on behalf of another state or anything like that. This concerns the Chelsea Manning publications, which revealed the true face of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan and the torture system under the Bush wars and Guantanamo Bay and so on. Even the US doesn't allege that it was in relation to a different state or that the purpose was anything other than to publish. So it really is criminalizing journalism. And what are we even talking about? Facing a fair trial for publishing the truth. Then there's the fact that it's in Virginia. It's a national security court. Effectively, the jury pool is of that area is people who are either related to very closely or working with or are working for the intelligence and security sector, which of course is extremely hostile to Julian. And you probably would be, anyway, like career-wise, who would want to be seen to let that guy, let Julian walk? It's just impossible for Julian to get a fair trial, and we shouldn't even be talking about a trial, let alone charges here. And then there's the very obvious point that there are reports that Pompeo was planning to assassinate Julian.
Right.
When he was CIA director, that this was a conversation that was had in the White House, that there was a request at Langley for plans to be drawn up about how to go about it, to kidnap him, to rendition him, and to assassinate him. It just is simply mind-blowing that the courts in the UK are even entertaining this case. And the fact that they're entertaining it simply shows how the lack of robustness when it comes to a case like this, and it's frankly really shocking. But I think there's also another element, which in the US you have a very strong First Amendment. You have the gold standard worldwide, and I think there's perhaps a projection from your perspective that the rest of the Western world is similar, and in fact, that's not the case. There are no strong protections for free speech in the UK, not constitutionally at least. There's certain cultural there's a culture around free speech and freedom of the press and so on, but it doesn't have it in a written constitution, for example.
Right. And
they have the Official Secrets Act, and there's, in fact, in the UK, a very strong reverence for the security services. I mean, James Bond is
right.
No, seriously, I think in the US, you have films about the CIA, and often they're kind of
Mission
bad
Impossible,
guys. There are a lot of
that
bad
kind of
guys there.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
In the UK, it's very rare that the intelligence services are seen to be evil or incompetent or anything like that. There's a very different culture around it. And so I think at the beginning, when the extradition request came through and the actual allegations came through, there was some legal commentary by the US legal pundits, who said, well, this is simply, the UK will never go along with it. These are political offenses. The Espionage Act, that's prohibited under the extradition treaty. Technically, this will, on technical grounds, can't go through, and this is just for show. But what I think they didn't take into account is the deference that the UK always shows the US.
Right.
It's the little poodle. And secondly, that there is a much weaker legal and politically as well culture around free speech. So in fact, it's easy for the UK to extradite Julian and put this case, which is a calamity for the First Amendment, in the lap of the Virginia courts. And I'm sure you have seen all the letters to the Attorney General, to the President, and so on, saying this case should never reach a U.S. courtroom because the First Amendment is in jeopardy if it does, because it basically attempts to blow a hole through First Amendment protections.
Well,
I'm sorry, Russell.
Go ahead, Keith.
I was just going to say, so Day X, which is the sort of final hearing set for February 20th and 21st, is Julian's last chance at avoiding extradition here to the U.S. So you went over in the last question that you are not expecting a fair trial, but what has to happen outside of the courtroom? And by outside of the courtroom, I'm referencing the need to flood the streets with protesters outside the courthouse. I know there have been calls to action for that day. What are you trying to put together in terms of a mass demonstration, and how can people get involved with that? If they're in the UK, obviously we want them there. Are there going to be sister demonstrations around the world? How can people get involved on those two key days, February 20th and 21st?
Well, absolutely. There are basically two essential actions for people in the United States. I'd say the first one, and these are not do one, not the other, please do both, is to call your congressional representatives and ask them to sign on to House Resolution 934, which is a resolution to drop the case against Julian because of the First Amendment implications, because it criminalizes journalism, because it is such an important case, and that is currently, accepting signatures, and we have to try to get people from both sides of politics, all sides of politics, to sign onto that House Resolution 934. And then there is Day X, and we have been announcing Day X for some time now, but now we have the date. So basically, because it's a legal proceeding in the UK, it's been quite a drawn out affair, and we don't control the diary. But now the courts have announced what Day X will be, and that is the 20th and 21st of February. This is a 2-day public hearing in which there will be a final consideration by the High Court about whether to reopen the case. Technically, that's what it is. Julian tried to appeal the decision to extradite him, and they didn't even allow him. They refused him permission to appeal. So they haven't even allowed Julian to appeal beyond the lowest court decision, which is, another travesty when you have all the free press organizations of the world in the US, in the UK, everywhere, and all the human rights organizations saying this case is the most important case of our time in terms of press freedom and free speech. So anyway, that appeal has been refused, but there is this final attempt to reopen that decision, and it will be a public hearing, 2 days, and there will be demonstrations around the world. And so I will be announcing on my Twitter or X a map with all the planned protests. And these protests can be big or small. I mean, just because if you live in a small location and it's just one person, that's great. That still counts. In Europe is absolutely astounding. I mean, there's small villages in Austria with one person who's done a chalk outline of the cell, of the size of Julian's cell, in the town center, in the town square, and just to raise awareness and just holding up a free Assange. And then you have things like the city of Rome, the city council of Rome, and the city council of Naples have made Julian honorary citizen of Naples and of the city of Rome. So these are demonstrations big and small that are really the lifeblood of a grassroots movement, and that is what needs to happen all over the world, so that the signal is loud and clear that this is an illegitimate travesty, and that Julian needs to be freed. And the reality is this: when it's a political case, the persecuted individual needs political capital, and that's why he was maligned. That's why he was attacked. There was an orchestrated attack. Stories were deliberately planted in the press. The Guardian published a front page, completely concocted story, and that was because the journalistic standards had completely collapsed when it came to Julian. Anything goes was the message in order to attack Julian. And that was, of course, the preamble for his arrest. He was arrested at the point where there had been so many stories that were completely unfounded and libelous in order to undermine his political support. So any action, and it's not just one, but the accumulative effect of the support is really effective in a political case. And I'd also say, talk to your friends and coworkers and family. about this case, because that's really how opinion is moved over time. And anyone that comes into contact with this case, who is a kind of a bystander, immediately gets interested, because it's so interesting, B, it's so unjust, and the consequences are so grave, that they're immediately interested. So do talk to people. There are lots of very good materials at this stage, books about the case by Kevin Gostola, by Stefania Mariti, by Niels Meltzer. Julian's books are also published by Verso. And, I just say, get involved, but above all, ask your representatives to sign on to House Resolution 934, and also on Day X, 20th and 21st, and beyond, whatever happens on those days, to commit to help free Julian, because it's about him, and, I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that Julian is suffering, and that is enough. That should be enough for people to get involved. But also, there are consequences for everyone and for the future of a free and open society. So everyone has a stake in this as well.
Okay, so you heard that. We get a lot of questions. What can people do? Call your congressperson, support Resolution 934, follow Stella Assange on X. She will be posting different protests and the sites for them. Even if you can get to London, get out into the streets for February 20th and 21st for Day X demonstrations. And even if you can't, you can do it where you are. You have somebody in a town demonstrating on their own. Hopefully they'll get other people to join them. Anything else you want people to know, Stella?
Well, in the United States, Assange Defense is, you should follow Assange Defense, as well as myself. And yes, and also help the campaign, because obviously the US government and Julian's enemies have put enormous resources into persecuting him and imprisoning him. And it takes resources to get him free. And we all, everyone can help in whatever way they can, but this is an important way for those who can.
This is wherever you are on the political spectrum, this impacts all of us. If Julian is successfully prosecuted, none of our speech is safe. That's something everyone has to understand. This is one of the great battles of our time. Stella, thank you very, very much for joining us, for your courage, for everything you're doing. And we all wish you well, and best wishes for February.
Thank you.
And to Misha.
All right, everyone. We are going to play a quick ad and then see everyone over on Rumble. It's time we're switching to Rumble now. See you there.
This is real. I had back tax. Hey, did you see the headline in the past few weeks? Mark Zuckerberg has got an apocalypse shelter. Did you see at WEF they're talking about new virus X? Sounds very much like Event 201. So my point here is that we should be prepared for what they're preparing for us. With close to 90% of the pharmaceuticals in the United States, they're produced outside the United States. What happens when the next global crisis strikes? Countries clamp down on exports, they stockpile, the price of drugs rise on pharmacy shelves across America. So no matter what's coming in 2024, the most important thing you could do, be prepared ahead of time, especially with medications. That's where the wellness company comes in. The wellness company is, who's on the wellness company? Well, the chief medical board is made up of none other than Dr. Peter McCullough. You know him from the show. Dr. Drew Pinsky. We all know Dr. Drew. And truth-telling doctors who are rooted in the commitment to building a parallel healthcare system and empowering you to take control of your health. And how do you do that? Well, they have the wellness company's medical emergency kit. This kit includes 8 life-saving medications, including amoxicillin, a Z-Pak, and ivermectin. So you could rest easy knowing that you have emergency medications on hand along with a guidebook for safe use. From tick bites to COVID to extreme bioterror events, every scenario is covered. So you can avoid hospital waiting times, avoid the cost of doctor visits or calling an ambulance or getting caught unexpectedly when traveling without a healthcare plan. And we're going to get you a discount on the Wellness Medical Emergency Kit. Go to twc.health/Jimmy and grab your medical emergency kit right now. That's twc.health/Jimmy, and the code Jimmy saves you 15% at checkout. Don't wait until you need it. Take control of your health today with the Wellness Company's medical emergency kit. twc.health/Jimmy. Use promo code Jimmy. You got to have somebody helping you. I did. And the IRS, by the way, they've hired 20,000 new agents and they're sending millions of final demand letters. So your best defense against this kind of stuff is Tax Network USA. Don't let the IRS tax take advantage of you. With over 14 years of experience, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in back taxes. No matter your tax issue size, their expertise is your advantage. They're specializing in negotiating with the IRS, aiming to reduce your debt significantly. Tax Network USA doesn't just negotiate, they protect your assets from IRS seizures, and they manage your yearly returns for ongoing compliance. Importantly, they are licensed to help with all state tax issues, regardless of where you live in the United States. The clock's ticking. Don't wait as the IRS steps up its game. Seize control of your financial future now. Contact Tax Network USA for immediate relief and expert guidance. Where do you go? Do you go to 1-800-245-6000 or visit tnusa.com/Jimmy. Don't let tax issues overpower you. Turn to Tax Network USA and find your path to financial peace of mind.
Hey, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there for more AM Joy and the rest of MSNBC. And click on any of the videos right here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. And you can get more videos from MSNBC for free every day with our newsletter. Just visit